Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be reading from our Not Sleep, so let's jump into it. The morgue drawer that slammed shut. I was working my third graveyard shift at a private hospital in Houston. As the newbie morgue tech, I was tasked with tagging and logging a body of an older man who died of cardiac arrest. I slid him into one of the metal drawers and closed it. These are the drawers where we keep the bodies until they're picked up by the funeral home. The old man's vitals were still warm, so I left his drawer slightly ajar as to not disturb the rigor mortis that was sure to set in soon. I peeled off my nitrile gloves, put on a fresh pair and went to retrieve the body bag from the gurney outside the morgue. When I turned around, I saw one of the drawers slam shut. Startled, I whipped around to see which one of the other techs was messing with me, but they were all asleep in the break room. I was alone. When I turned back to the drawers, the one that had slammed shut was closed. I walked over and pulled it open. It was empty. The drawer was labeled B7. B7. I looked down at the toe tag on the body I had just put away and it read B7. I looked back at the drawer. It was empty. How could the body have gotten out of the drawer? They were zipped up in a body bag with their hands and legs secured with straps. And I had only left the drawer open for a few seconds. I quickly checked the other drawers just to make sure nothing else was out of place. And to confirm that there was no other body in the morgue that matched the description of the missing body. Everything was in order. I was about to go back to the body bag when the lights flickered overhead. I jumped, then shook my head to clear it. What was I? Some kind of scared little girl. This is the morgue. The only things that should startle you are the bodies. I walked out of the morgue, grabbed the body bag and threw it into the drawer that was clearly marked B7. I tried to convince myself that what I had seen was just some trick of the light, or maybe I had somehow mislogged the body and it had gone to the wrong drawer, but something didn't feel right. I pulled the drawer closed, locked it and wheeled it out of the morgue into the hallway. As I made my way to the elevator, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I felt a cold breeze on the back of my neck, despite the air conditioning blasting inside the hospital. I got onto the elevator and pressed the ground floor button. I don't know why I did this. It wasn't like I was scared of heights or that I thought the ghost was going to jump out and kill me. I just knew I needed to get out of the morgue. I stepped out of the elevator and into the ground floor lobby. It was quiet, too quiet. I looked down the long hallway that stretched before me, the windows at the end reflecting the neon lights from the hospital sign outside. I couldn't help but think that if I walked through those doors, I would find the ghost of the old man standing there smiling at me. I felt my pager in my pocket vibrate. I pulled it out and saw that I had a message from one of the other techs. "You still alive?" I laughed and typed back, "What?" "Of course I'm alive. Why wouldn't I be?" The reply came back almost instantly. "Just checking." "You were freaking me out back there." I stared at the text in disbelief. "What do you mean?" "What were you doing?" He replied with a single word, "Drawer." I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself down. Maybe I really had mislogged the body and it had gone to the wrong drawer. Yeah, that's what it was. It was just a simple mistake. I turned and walked back toward the morgue. As I rounded the corner, I saw the two sets of double doors at the end of the hall. They were closed. Good. If anyone was walking through there, I didn't want them to see me. I could still feel the eyes of the old man on me, guiding me toward my doom. I reached out and pushed the doors open. It was pitch black. I squinted, trying to make out any shapes in the darkness. All I saw were two figures standing in front of the closed morgue doors. I called out, "Hey," and they turned around. I screamed and ran. I don't remember how long I ran for, but eventually I made it to my car and I drove straight home. I haven't been back to that hospital since. I quit the next morning. That's all. And, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed that no sleep story. If you did, please leave a like. If you want to hear more stories like this, stay tuned for more content.
Welcome to my channel, where creepy things happen at fast food restaurants. Today, we re-answering the age-old. What is a woman doing sitting in her car in a fast food drive-thru at 3 a.m.? Our next Reddit post is from user MC Frontalot. Back when I was in college, I used to work the late-night shift at a 24-hour fast food place, the night before Labor Day. My manager made me stay behind after all the other employees had left, so that I could close out the registers. So I'm sitting there by myself, just finishing up some paperwork when the drive-thru bell rings. At this point, it was almost 3 a.m., and the only customers who come through the drive-thru at this hour are either drunk or high. So I just kind of half-heartedly said, "Hi, welcome to McDonald's. Can I take your order?" And the response I got back was, "Hello," which is super weird because usually these people don't even respond. But this time the voice was really raspy, like she had just smoked a pack of cigarettes. So I just figured it was another drunk person in a car as I'm taking their order. I glance over at the monitor, and what I see makes me want to drop to my knees and worship the Lord. In front of me is a pale white woman with dark circles under her eyes. Now, she wasn't necessarily pale like Casper, the friendly ghost. She was more deathly pale, like a corpse that's been left out in the sun for too long. She's sitting in her car, staring straight at the camera and smiling. Not just any smile, mind you, but a smile that would make Freddy Krueger look like a stand-up comedian. And then I notice that her lips are split and she has blood dripping down her chin. My heart begins to race. I try to calm myself down by telling myself that it is just a drunk girl wearing a mask. But something about the way she's sitting still and staring directly at me gave me the willies. I look away to try to compose myself and think, okay, maybe if I ignore the monitor, whatever it is will eventually go away. But no such luck. The voice comes over the headset again and says, "Hello, are you there?" And I quickly reply, Yeah, sorry, just giving you your change back." Then I hear what sounds like her inhaling deeply, and then she speaks again. "I didn't order food. I came to feed." Immediately I start to panic. I know that we have this emergency button under the counter that'll contact the police. But as I reach for it, I remember my manager telling me that they've been having problems with people abusing the alarm, and we were unsupposed to use it unless it was an actual emergency. I do and have time to assess whether or not this is an actual emergency, because the woman suddenly slams on the car horn repeatedly. Startled, I yelp and jump back. She laughs, and the sound sends shivers down my spine. I can tell that she's right outside the window now. I'm frozen in fear as I watch her get out of her car. She throws open the door and steps out. The monitor goes black. I can hear the door slam shut and heavy footsteps approaching the counter. My hands are shaking so badly that I can barely breathe. I call out, "Help! Someone please come help me." No response. Oh, of course. Because everyone else has gone home, and my manager doesn't care if I live or die. Finally, I find the strength to get off the stool and run to the window. The parking lot is empty. There's no sign of the woman anywhere. But her voice echoes through the headset saying, "You should have let me in. You should have let me in. You should have let me in." I rip the headset off and hurl it across the room. I don't even bother to lock the door as I run out of the restaurant and jump in my car. As I speed out of the parking lot, I glance over my shoulder to see if the woman is following me. And to this day, I still wonder if she was standing in the same spot, watching me drive away. And that's our story. Now, normally I won't think much of a pale woman who's staring at the camera with a bloodied smile. But put that in a story with a voice that sounds like nails on a chalkboard, and you've got yourself a terrifying tale. This reminds me of the story about the faceless woman at the bus stop. Have you ever seen a stranger in your peripheral vision? Just a quick glimpse of someone standing there and then they disappear. Well, sometimes these stories can be terrifying, like the story about the hitchhiker in the passenger seat. Our next Reddit post is from another user. I had a similar experience at a fast food joint here in New Zealand. I was working the drive-thru and I could see on the monitor this lady walking around her car like she was looking for something. I could hear her voice through the speaker. It was really raspy and sounded like she had a bad cold. She asked for a Coke Zero, which we didn't have. So I apologized and asked if she'd like anything else. She responded, No, I'm waiting for someone. Okay, I thought. Sure, whatever. Maybe she's waiting for a friend or family member. She was parked in the second spot. So I told her that she could move forward and wait in the first spot if she'd like. She said thanks and moved up to the first spot. A few minutes went by, and she started asking for service again. I explained that she'd have to pull up and park her car to use the toilets. She responded, "Oh no, I don't want to do that. I'm waiting for someone." A few more minutes passed and she starts getting agitated. She demanded to speak to a manager. So I put her on hold, and I go to grab my manager. I explain the situation to my manager, and he tells me that since she's already in the ordering spot, just give her some fries to keep her occupied until her friend or whoever shows up. So I grab a small fry and try to hand it to her through the window. She refuses to take it and instead starts banging on the glass. I immediately yank my hand back and she screams, "What the F, you B-word," and proceeds to hang up. We never did see her get out of her car or see who she was waiting for. And I'm glad because whatever it was, I wouldn't want to meet it. I hate to admit that this story happened at KFC, but it's probably best that way. Imagine being hungry for fried chicken and then seeing a crazed woman waiting in her car. If that doesn't ruin your appetite, then nothing will. I gotta say this one stumped me. First, I assumed that the lady was waiting for someone who was picking her up. But if she's going to the bathroom, why not just get out of her car and use the facilities? Unless, of course, the person she's waiting for is coming out of the bathroom. That would be pretty disgusting. But then why would she demand to speak to a manager? Yeah, I don't think the manager would have been able to help her out either. Why would anyone refuse free fries? That's just crazy. But that's all we have today, so thank you guys for watching. If you liked this video, also hit that subscribe button because I put out new videos every single day. Welcome to r/no sleep, and today we'll be reading from the D. Hey guys, I'm back with another set of terrifying true stories from the internet's most popular subreddit, No Sleep, so let's jump right into it. Our first story is night shift at the gas station. This happened when I was about 17 years old, and it's the only time I've ever quit my job without giving 2 weeks' notice. To protect the innocent. I've changed all the names of the places mentioned in this story to protect myself and those involved. I grew up in Denton, Texas, which is a college town. In Denton, there are 3 main gas stations near the university, where most students will fill up their gas tanks. The one I'm referring to in this story is located on the corner of Hickory Street and Bell Avenue. It's not on that busy of a street, but there's usually cars passing by every couple of minutes or so. There are 2 main roads leading to this gas station. One road leads directly to the highway, and the other one leads to the university. For safety reasons, most employees will park in the front parking lot, which is close to the door, whereas the customers will usually park behind the store near the pumps. For some reason, we never had cameras inside the store, just outside. I don't know why, maybe someone knows. The reason why I bring this up is because it's relevant to the story. Oh, also, we didn't have security either, which seemed like a bad decision after the second week of working there. I worked the night shift, 12 to 6 a.m., which I always hated. Meet the weirdest people during those hours. But this guy wasn't weird. He was off. It was about 2 in the morning, and I was stocking up on chips. I was pulling out the new shipment of barbecue-flavored Lay's when the bell above the door chimed. I looked up and saw a man walking in. He was tall and skinny, with longish sandy-colored hair that reached his mid-back. His skin was white like flour and covered in scratches, not cuts, actual scratches, like a cat had taken a swipe at him. He had no shirt on and no shoes. It was the middle of July, so I couldn't tell if he had socks on. I tried to keep eye contact, but he kept looking away, staring at the floor or ceiling. He shuffled up to the counter and said, "Do you have a lighter?" I told him we keep them by the registers, and he nodded. He picked it up and put it in his pocket. "Thanks," he whispered. "I need some coffee, too." I asked what kind, and he replied, "Black, please." I made it for him and handed it over. He took it without saying anything and slowly sipped on it. While he was waiting for his coffee, I noticed how thin he was. It was obvious he hadn't eaten in days. He looked like he was on drugs. I mean, hell, maybe he was. I didn't care. I'm not nosy. I just make conversation with most customers. It makes my job more tolerable. But with this guy, I could feel my guard going up. I wanted to ask him if he was okay or if he needed help, but I didn't. I just rang him up. When it was time for him to leave, he grabbed his lighter and coffee and walked toward the door. "Wait," I said. He stopped and turned around. Slowly he cocked his head and looked at me. I don't want to upset you, but you need to put on a shirt. It's store policy. He looked away and started digging in his pocket. I thought he was going to pull out some cash, but instead he pulled out a crumpled piece of paper towel. On it were some numbers and letters scrawled. I frowned and asked him for money. He looked back at me with wide eyes and whispered, "You don't understand, I don't have any." I felt bad, I really did. But it was store policy. Told him I'd call the cops if he didn't leave. That's when he did something unexpected. He threw his coffee at me and screamed, "You're going to die tonight." He ran out the door and down the sidewalk. I remember standing there stunned and scared. My coworker Karen, who was older and bigger than me, ran up to the counter and asked what happened. I told her. She rolled her eyes and said I was imagining things. These types of people can smell fear and weakness, and they prey on it. This guy was high as a kite. Don't let it get to you. He's not coming back. And to prove she was right, the rest of the night went by without incident. No police showed up either. I guess he slipped and fell or passed out somewhere. I never saw him again. But what he said stuck with me. That night, every creak and moan of the house sounded like footsteps outside. Every tree branch tapping against my window was a fingernail. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my mind over and over again. Was I really in danger? Should I have called the cops? The next morning, I went to work early to clean up and get ready for my next shift. As I was unlocking the front door, I noticed some graffiti on the glass. I rubbed it clean and looked at it. It read, "1 down, 2 to go." I don't know what that means. I quit the next day. I actually think this is a good story, and I love the ending. Even though it's a bit open-ended, like you left us hanging on a cliff. I feel like that was a good thing in this case, because it makes it a bit more creepy. Like, I think it's great that you added that little tidbit about the graffiti, because that really leaves us wondering, like, what is going on here? Is this guy stalking this employee? What's the significance of 1 down, 2 to go? But then again, this could all just be in OP's head. Maybe this person isn't actually in danger. Maybe he did just see some crazy homeless guy. I feel like even if that's the case, it's still a pretty scary encounter nonetheless. But the reason I think this story works so well is because of the build-up. We see OP becoming increasingly more uncomfortable throughout the entire story. I think the author did a great job with showing that through descriptive language. For example, when we first meet this guy, he's completely unfazed by OP, and he doesn't look him in the eyes. And he's got these scratches all over his body, and he's shirtless in the middle of July, and then he orders a coffee. And then he throws the coffee at him and says, "You're going to die tonight." And then the next morning there's this graffiti on the wall saying, 1 down, 2 to go. So yeah, I agree with the sentiment of this comment. I think this is a pretty good story, and I love the ambiguous ending. But let me know what you think. Do you think Opus is actually in danger, or do you think this is all in his head? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Welcome to my channel where OP gets more than he bargained for, when he tries to sneak into a midnight showing of Poltergeist. Our next Reddit post is from our Phoenix, Arizona user. I work at a movie theater in Phoenix, Arizona as an overnight cleaner. My shift starts at midnight when the theater closes. My job is simple. Clean the floors, check every auditorium to make sure all the customers are out, and that the snack bar is clean. The snack bar is cleaned by the employees before they clock out. My only real responsibility is the cleanliness of the lobby and the auditoriums. So if it took me 2 hours to complete all of my tasks, I could clock out after 2 hours, or I could stay longer if I wanted. I'm not saying this story happened on Halloween, but it did happen on Halloween. This was probably my 3rd or 4th time doing this job on Halloween. On this particular night, we closed at midnight. Because there were no late-night showings, I finished cleaning the lobby and went to go check the auditoriums. All of the lights were turned off, with the exception of the emergency exit signs. So I started with Theater 1, which was completely empty. Then I moved on to Theater 2, also empty. I continued on to Theater 3, 4, 5, no customers. I arrived at Theater 6. This was the last theater that I had to check. When I opened the door, I noticed a very strange noise coming from inside. It sounded like the film reel had started back up. I stopped and listened for a moment. Yep, the film was definitely playing. I stepped inside and walked toward the projection room to investigate. As I was walking, I could see the shape of a person sitting in the very first row of seats. I'll admit that I was scared, but my curiosity got the best of me. I had to see who was left in the theater. The closer I got, the more I could see that the shape was indeed a person. I could also hear the film clearly now. It was Poltergeist, the movie about ghosts. What was playing was the scene where the ghosts come out of the TV. As I approached, I could make out the details of the figure. It was a tall, thin man wearing a long burlap sack that covered their entire body. The only part of them that was visible was their face. Actually, I think that's an exaggeration. The only part of their body that was visible was the top of their heads. Their faces were completely covered by the sacks. There were holes cut out for their eyes, though.
I don't know why I did what I did next.
I guess I was trying to be funny, so I started to walk past the figure and casually said, "Hey, you can't be here. You need to leave." The man looked up at me with these soulless black eyes, stood up, revealing his full height. If he was short, maybe around 4 feet, 11 inches, maybe even shorter, and he started to walk toward me. I backed away slowly. The man continued to approach. I could see the sack dragging along the ground behind him. He was getting closer and closer, and I was backing away, stumbling over my own feet. It got close enough that he could speak to me. He leaned in and whispered, "Don't rewind me again," then turned and walked back to his seat. The screen behind him flashed red for a moment, and then he was gone. The seat was empty. I couldn't see him anywhere. I looked down and saw the burlap sack laying on the floor where he had been sitting. I cautiously approached the sack, and it started moving. I screamed and ran to get as far away from it as possible. I made it to the door and looked back. The sack was still moving. I backed out the door and leaned against it. I decided that I wasn't going back in there anytime soon. Maybe I would wait until morning. I didn't want to call my manager, because it would have seemed ridiculous. Plus, I was pretty sure that he wouldn't believe me. I waited a few minutes, and eventually went back in to retrieve the sack. I threw it in the trash and locked the theater. I worked there alone. The next morning, I told my manager about the incident, and he just laughed and said that there was a new feature in the Poltergeist movie that made the figures look real lifelike. I bought it. I clocked out and went home. I called my friend and told him what had happened. Thought it was hilarious and told me to go back and get the video camera to record the ghost. I knew what he was trying to do, but I didn't fall for it. I was done with ghosts for the night. The next day I was transferred to concessions. I never had to clean Theater 6 again. Down in the comments we have this story from another Reddit user. Used to work security at a movie theater. People would regularly try to sneak in after they paid for concessions, or sneak back in after going out for a smoke or something. We'd always shine the light in the aisle directly on them, and they'd nope out of there. After a while, we'd just turn the lights off and let them settle in. Better run out with our That's just how it was in my city. But where I live now, people have to pay extra for a late night fee if they want to see a movie after 10 p.m. And then a user named Big Red Dog 68 says, "Where I live, the local independent theater has a midnight showing every Friday and Saturday night for $5. The ushers will find you and escort you out if you fall asleep, which has happened many times." And finally, a story from user Kyle Thrace. "I worked at a movie theater in high school back when we had actual film reels. A few times after a double feature, when the theater would be nearly empty, would he have to manually run the film back to the beginning because the mechanism that did it automatically had failed. About 3 a.m. one night, I was rewinding Freaky Friday on the worst projector in the building, which made it take forever. Suddenly, I heard what sounded like screams in the theater. I ignored it and kept winding. The screams got louder and more desperate, but I was almost done, so I just kept winding. Finally, the film hit the end of the take-up reel, and I sighed in relief, wiping my sweaty hands on my dirty uniform. I walked out of the projection room and looked down the mostly empty rows of seats. Then I noticed something. In the middle of the row closest to the screen sat a single woman in a wheelchair. She was staring straight ahead with her mouth open wide, making the silent scream motion with her hands. She looked at me, mouthed "thank you," and then wheeled herself out of the theater. I was freaked out, but more confused than scared. It was just a few weeks later that I read about the Hookman in the local paper. Hookman being a crazed killer who would sneak into drive-ins and slash the tires of cars parked in couples' rows. Did the woman in the wheelchair know the Hookman? Was she his next target? I'm sorry. What was that? I can't hear you. The Hookman is coming. It's just my mom calling me to go downstairs and meet the cute boy she set me up with. Sure. Whatever you say, Mom. And that's all for our scary movie theater stories. But if you want to hear more terrifying tales from people who work in retail, stay tuned for more content. What is the most haunted place you've ever traveled? Hi, I'm the host, and I asked that question because as a kid, I used to travel all over the United States with my family. And we would go to these abandoned mental hospitals and asylums and prisons, anything that was off the beaten path. We would go check it out, and some of them were really haunted, and we experienced some scary things. So I'd love to hear your story. In the meantime, here's one from me. This happened when I was about 19 years old. I was living in Tacoma, Washington, and I got a job as a security guard at an old elementary school. The school had been built in 1923. And it was in T until 1986 that it finally closed its doors after 63 years of educating students. It sat vacant for about 10 years, and then the city finally decided they were going to renovate the building and turn it into an art center. I was hired to patrol the building every hour and basically just keep people out as they were renovating, as most of the building was completely gutted. There was no power, no plumbing, no furniture, nothing like that, just the four walls still standing. There was one set of stairs that went from the front door to the second floor, and every hour I'd walk up those stairs and turn around and walk back down. It was so boring. There was an office where I could sit and fill out paperwork and such, but most of the time I preferred to walk around. On this particular night, I remember it was a Friday night, and I had just finished my shift. I'd walked around the entire building, checked all the windows, made sure everything was secure. I sat down in the office to fill out some paperwork. About 15 minutes into my shift, I heard what sounded like children giggling. Now, this was weird because, like I said, the building had been empty for 10 years. And also, even if there were children in the area, they would be able to get in because all the doors were locked except for the front door. The front door was propped open to allow for deliveries during the renovation. But I heard these children giggling, and they were coming from the direction of the gymnasium, so I got up and walked toward the gym. As I got closer, I started to hear what sounded like children playing. I couldn't see anyone, but I could hear them bouncing basketballs. As I got to the door that led into the gym, I noticed that the door was slightly ajar. And being a little bit creeped out at this point, I pushed the door open and walked in. I scanned the gym with my flashlight, looked up in the bleachers. There was nobody there. And then I noticed a pair of feet on the other side of the gym. I shined my light over and there was a pair of little girl's feet. She was wearing these little ballet slippers. And then she was sitting there bouncing a basketball. I said hello. Obviously there was no reply. I took a step toward her and she disappeared. I mean, literally, she was there 1 second and then she was gone the next. I don't know if she tripped and fell or what happened. I didn't see her fall. I felt a presence behind me and I turned around. And in the 3 seconds that it took for me to turn around, I could have sworn that I saw the faintest outline of a little girl standing in the doorway. And then she was gone. At this point, I was freaked out. I grabbed my radio and I was going to call my supervisor, but there was no signal in this old school. I tried calling 911 on my cell phone, and the line was dead. I don't know if they were doing construction on the lines, but I couldn't get out of that building fast enough. I ran to the front door. I didn't even bother unlocking it. I just ran outside, and as I ran past the playground, I noticed a little girl's handprint in the dust on my shoulder. And it was a cold night, and there was no wind, and not a single breeze. But the dust was undisturbed, except for that handprint. And it looked like the handprint of a small child. Never went back. Have you ever seen a ghost? Let me know in the comments below. And if you've never seen a ghost, let me know how old you are and maybe I can relate. because I didn't see my first ghost until I was 19 years old. I never believed in ghosts until I was 19.